There you go.
Good morning. Welcome to the June 27th, 2018 meeting of the Operations Board of Directors, Monterey Bay Community Power. It's now 10:36, and I'd like to ask the Madam Clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Bear with me while I get through roll call here.
Yeah.
Director Serrano, County of Santa Cruz alternate, participating from Santa Cruz.
Here.
Director Bernal, participating from Santa Cruz.
Here.
Director Huffaker.
Here.
Goldstein is absent. Bauman. Harvey is absent. Long.
Here.
Gonzalez, alternate for County of San Benito.
Here.
Vice Chair Corpus.
Here.
And Chair Mendez is absent.
Okay, we have a quorum. So if you'll all stand with me, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So let me call on the clerk. Are there any additions and deletions to the consent or regular agenda?
There are not.
Thank you, Brent. Board members, do you have any announcements for additions or deletions? Okay, very good. Let's go to item 4. Public comment for matters that are not listed on the agenda. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us on items that are not listed on the agenda. So if you're here from the public and you'd like to speak up to 3 minutes, that's your maximum time, please. Yes, Brent?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Please go to the podium. We'll try to keep track of both sites here. Now, we're now open for public comment. This is amazing. Why aren't my council meters like this? Okay, gone. Public comment is over. Well, next on our agenda is board member disqualifications. Are there any statements or disqualifications for any of our board members? Okay, no conflicts. Very good. So next we have a presentation by staff on the overview of the strategic business plan. Tom, is that you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been discussing the strategic plan now for some time. We spent probably the last 3 months, the staff that is putting it together. The strategic plan is really a roadmap. It's a roadmap for the staff to understand what guides them and the goals that they need to achieve, and it gives them a variety of strategies and tactics to achieve those goals. It is it's in front of you. We've made copies of it, and we do have a presentation. We're going to go through it very quickly. But I just wanted to start by sharing with you at least what the driver and the guides that I use in order to try to put this strategic plan together. Generally, I look at any corporation or company or an agency to exist for generally 3 reasons. One is to serve the people that work every day, that come in and spend 10, sometimes 12 hours doing what's necessary to take care of the day's business, and that's the staff. And 2, to serve the members that have collectively got together and decided to put their dollars in effect to make this agency happen because they believe that it will provide value to the community. And third, and most importantly, the customers that are buying our products and without whom we can't be in business. Those are the three constituents that are very important here. In our case, and given the business that we're in, I'm adding a fourth one, which would be the planet, because that's really what we are after, is to try to do what we can in order to perhaps do a small contribution to the change that need to be done in our climate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I can just very quickly go through the goals that we have. We're starting obviously with a goal of building high-performance team that will be effective and will do well for this agency. And there are a number of strategies in there that basically make sure that that team is inclusive and that the employees are well compensated and they are healthy and happy in doing every day's work. Our second goal is to deliver affordable and reliable and carbon-free services for customers. That's pretty much the core of our JPA. Again, making sure that we decarbonize as best as we can, make sure that those the electricity is the least expensive that we can offer, and finally provide, and that coming in the next goal, provide local jobs. So specifically, the strategies here is to try to help our member agencies reach or minimize the greenhouse gas in their respective cities. You are all required at one point or another based on your climate action plan, to reduce greenhouse gas in your city. And by going into a carbon-free on the electricity side, almost immediately you end up saving about 25 to 30% of or meeting about 25 to 30% of the goal of greenhouse reduction. And again, in each of your cities, if you look at the before and after, starting before we start the operation and after we are completely rolled in, you'll find that if you go out there and count free greenhouse gas, it's going to be reduced substantially. And of course, stimulating local investments is very important to us, and we're looking at a variety of ways of doing that now by putting together a number of programs that will be very helpful for you folks and for the community and to the people that do business here in Tri-County area. Another goal for us is to deliver low-cost, reliable electricity service and predictable prices. And obviously we're doing that by delivering at least this year 3% rebate on the service that we are providing. It's important also to keep in mind that that in order for us to be able to do that and to afford the programs that we would like to implement, that we to the best extent possible, make sure that the supply resources that we are committing to, in addition to being 100% carbon free, also to be the lowest cost that we can offer. So please keep that in mind as we begin to go into the second and third operating year, because things lately have been a little bit more expensive than anticipated. But we still are doing what we can in order to make sure that these supply resources come to us at lower costs, so we can afford to give rebates and do more programs. Obviously, the last two goals talk about customer interaction and community engagement. I can tell you, I mean, obviously, in order for us to be able to offer programs and sell those programs to the people that live and do business here in the Tri-County, we need to engage them as often as possible. We need to be out there marketing those programs and being around the community day in and day out. And we have been actually, if I count the number of events and number of presentations that we have made so far in the last 7 or 8 months, I think we're probably in 40 plus, but I'm pretty sure the marketing staff will correct me if need to. But I think we're way up there now, and once we are fully rolled out with all the residential customers coming in July, there will be a lot more engagement that we need to have with the community. I'm going to stop here. Again, I want to remind you that this strategic plan is really a guide for the staff to help us just move forward and refer to it as often as possible. Do expect that a lot of the tactics that we have in this strategic plan to change often. The strategies probably will be changing less often. The goals probably seldom. But our mission is going to most likely stay the same unless at one point or another you folks decide to change it. And I'll stop here and address any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Any questions of the board members? This is a discussion item.
Compliments on the document.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baumann. Any other comments or questions?
Tom, this is Matt Huffaker. Just a quick question. First off, I think it's a great plan, and I applaud your efforts to ensure that you guys are targeting, and that we are targeting a high degree of employee engagement. I see you've set a goal of having 90%. I'm just curious how you plan on measuring that.
I'm going to ask JR to step up and see if he can help answer that question. Is he here?
I think so.
There you go.
Good morning, everybody. My name is J.R. Killiger. I'm the new Director of Communications and External Affairs. Before I answer this question, I just wanted to say it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this team, to be able to kind of shepherd forward this program for the Tri-County region. I'm really excited to be a part of this great team, so thank you for the opportunity. In terms of the retention rate, kind of looking at the other CCAs and looking at the importance of having a high-performance team, we wanted to kind of put an actual qualitative or a quantitative measure to this, saying that we don't want to have a lot of people leaving the shop. We want folks to stay. So we felt like if we could keep 90% of the employees here and have some level of turnover, because folks may have to move, they may have other opportunities, but we wanted to put a quantitative measure to that, and that's how we arrived at 90%.
Very good. Matt, do you have any more questions?
Not at this time.
All right. Any other questions or comments for discussion? Tom, I have an overall one which relates to the last question, which is, are you developing metrics for each of these strategies, or how will the measurements be handled, I guess?
We certainly are, and it may take us a little time, to be honest with you. I always like for every tactic and for every goal to make sure that we do have metrics. Being the first strategic plan out the gate, and given how busy we all are, I didn't want to bind ourselves and bind the staff really hard, but we've done some metrics in here that we will report against, and we'll eventually report against everything in this strategic plan. Probably the more important metrics that you folks have are the metrics that are defined in my goals that I will be reporting on. Obviously, if we can't achieve our goals here in the strategic plan, I won't be able to achieve mine, and I'm sure you'll hold me responsible for that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? So this will be reported on again in a future meeting?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we will certainly, if not do an annual report on the strategic plan,
Right.
Maybe we'll try to do actually twice a year. We'll do reporting on it.
Right. So I have a question. Do we open this up for any public comments or questions?
Yes.
All right. The strategic plan is now open for public comment and questions. Please head to the mic and line up if you have questions. Okay, seeing none, we'll close this item and move to the consent agenda. There are items 7 through 10 are on our agenda, so we'll act on all items in one motion unless an item is pulled by a board member for further discussion. So are there any board members who wish to pull any of the 4 items? I'm waiting because there's a little bit of delay with the other screen. I'm not hearing any. So it doesn't look like there are any board members who want to pull any items. So are there any members who want to comment quickly on any of the remaining items on the consent agenda? Yes, Ben.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I think I need to abstain from approval of the minutes of July 12, 2017. I was not present.
Okay. Please note that in the minutes.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I, as well, need to abstain since I'm the alternate and I was not present.
All right, thank you so much. Anyone else?
This is
Right.
Matt Huffaker, that's the same for me.
And Melody, the same for me. Does that mean they don't have a quorum?
On that item.
Excuse
Yes,
me, I'm
Brian.
just clarifying on the minutes. Are you abstaining from both sets of minutes for Gonzalez, Serrano, and Huffaker?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
this is Martine Bernal. I wasn't at the July 12th either.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else that have any quick comments on the remaining items? Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak on items that were not pulled? Yes, Bren.
I believe that we do not have enough to qualify
Approve
a
the-
vote for the July 12th minute, so I'm going to pull those off
Correct.
and bring them back when we have all the primary, or as many of them as we can get here to approve those.
Very good.
If I may, through the chair, I'm not sure that you're precluded from voting on minutes even though you weren't present, so perhaps that's something council could look into.
Yeah, I was going to say that I have to check the rules. I can do that. I just need a brief break to do that.
I think members can vote
That's what I think, too.
on minutes even though they weren't present.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think so too.
That's our understanding. Our attorney has told us the same thing.
Okay. I have to check the rules, but I believe that's correct as well. So I
Do
can
you-
check the rules.
Do you want me to pull both minutes then, or?
Why
I'm just
don't-
trying to understand what we need to do here.
Why don't we approve them and then I'll rule check, and if we need to change something, we can do it after
Okay.
the rest of the.
Both are approved.
Okay, so we're clear on the July 12th meeting. If you weren't here, you can vote. All right, so we have 4 items. There's nobody. Okay. Is there any public member who wishes to speak on any items? I like this group. I should invite them to our council meeting. Okay, I'm looking for a motion on the all the 4 items on the consent agenda.
We do have a question on our side or a comment from the public.
All right, thank you.
This is pertaining to agenda item number 6 and the strategy to achieve 95% customer satisfaction by 2020.
Let's see.
wondering what plans there are to
It's going
get
backwards.
that community engagement. The fact that there aren't that many community members present at this meeting and that I haven't heard much about this agreement. I'm just wondering what plans are in place to get this out to the public and engage the community.
Okay, we're on consent items right now, so,
Given that there is a delay and we're teleconferencing, I would
Right.
say it would be advisable to let her make a comment. There's quite a bit of delay, so
Okay.
I think that's a reasonable accommodation for.
all right, she's made the comment. Is there a staff answer that you'd like to provide, or?
I'll be honest, I wasn't listening to the comment. We were trying to figure out whether the comment was appropriately placed in the agenda, so
Okay.
I think in order.
if she can just repeat the comment again, please.
If the member of the public can,
Yes, I'm here. The comment is a question pertaining to the plan to achieve a 95% customer satisfaction rate by 2020. I'm just curious as to what community outreach has looked like, being that there aren't that many community members present at the meetings. I'm curious about the strategy for engaging the community around this plan.
Generally, the approach in order to be able to measure customer satisfaction is to survey the customers. You would approach the lodge and the commercial customers. You do face-to-face interviews with them. For commercial customers, you send out letters, surveys, and you do random phone calls for residential customers. And through the answers that we get from the customers, whether they're commercial or residential, we'll be able to gauge their satisfaction with our performance.
Thank you.
thank you. I'll wait a few seconds.
Okay, and while we're waiting, I did check the rules of the Brown Act, and it is correct that alternates do not have to abstain from voting on past, as
Okay.
long as they're the other alternate for their governing body was present, then they can vote.
All right. Thank you for the clarification. So I'm looking for a motion again to approve the consent agenda.
I'm reading the minutes and I see that the primary member from the county was not present at the, the regular meeting of,
That would be required. The primary would have to be, one of the representatives from your governing body would have to be there for you to vote. But as long as one of them, I don't know if we can check that.
well, I could see that from the county, he was not present, Ray Espinoza.
It's complicated to check.
Yeah, for further clarification, this is getting a little.
I know.
So, can we just take the minutes off in this?
At the July 12th meeting, the County of San Benito, Espinoza was present
Yeah.
on roll call.
Vice Chair, I'd recommend that we just pull the minutes for both the July 12th and May 2nd and have the staff research the legalities of who can vote when the minutes are on the agenda, whether or not an alternate, or even if they aren't here at the meeting, and just clarify that legally.
Yeah,
And then
because
bring it back on
apparently
the
there's
next meeting.
still confusion about
Okay.
what's appropriate. And it might be different for San Benito County than it is for other organizations.
Let's just pull the both minutes and we'll bring them back in September.
Thank you. I don't think we need a motion. I think there's agreeable nods I see in the room from the board. Is there anybody that opposes that? Okay, the remaining items are the Treasury Report, number 9, and number 10 is the operating rules and regulations. So, how about a motion on that one? On those two items?
I move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. The motion's been made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mr. Harvey. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion passes. Okay, so we're now at the regular agenda, item number 11. So this is the Policy Board's report presented by Vice Chair, Councilmember Steve McShane. Welcome, Mr. McShane.
It's great to be here, Mr. Vice Chair. Well, we're excited to throw the switch. The event tomorrow, I think, is going to be a success in Santa Cruz, and the Policy Board is doing well. I would say we're engaged, we're excited, and very supportive of what's going on. So this brief report just covers our most recent meeting. A few things that sort of relate to just direction given to our CEO. The Super JPA that's in discussions with Cal CCA, we're very supportive of that and gave direction to our CEO to pursue arrangements through Cal CCA to look to projects and development that we can benefit from by partnering with other CCAs throughout the state. Also very excited to be acknowledged as an organization for consulting opportunities with the city of San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay as they explore their own CCAs. I think that's a real feather in our cap for our team, and just how quickly we've gotten on board and are up and running. Another discussion on resource adequacy, as was mentioned in the report. We're having to pay a little bit more of a premium for that resource adequacy that's required of us than was expected. But as it's looking good for the year, I think we'll make it up, and ultimately, we're running really well as an organization. It's interesting as some of the discussion takes place, the pressure's on Jeremy, when it comes to in-state, out-of-state, whether it's carbon-free or renewable, just the swing in what it costs to procure energy is something to be mindful of, the risk that's involved. And I feel confident in where we are and where we're going. I think that discussion was positive. One of the action items we took were the ad hoc committee's recommendations on performance goals for the CEO. There were 6 goals. I think there's an attachment to the packet that's been provided to the operations board members. Very, very good discussion. In fact, the committee remarked how easy it went. They were prepared for many meetings and debate, and I think our direction's clear, and we're very, very supportive of the action that was taken there. We also took action to ultimately bring in-house our general counsel. Pretty easy argument to make when it comes to the amount of contracts and the amount of legal work that goes into the operations of a $250 million organization plus. Also, some discussion as to the operation rules and regulations and serving as the bylaws for Monterey Bay Community Power. They were on the agenda today. Good discussion there. Interesting enough, as the ad hoc committee talked about our CEO and the goals and the review and all of that process, I think we are supportive and gave direction to the CEO to look into an executive committee model similar to the Air District, just so personnel, nominations, review, that sort of things can be handled at a greater detail within an executive committee. So that was one of the kind of other pieces of direction there. And then certainly the big item on the agenda was our Community Advisory Committee. I certainly want to acknowledge Beth and her work. It was amazing to see on the front end what really looked like a tremendous amount of work to find a qualified and committed group of individuals. And not only was the pool fantastic, quite deep and wide, there were no qualms with who was selected. We actually were in a larger venue just because we thought there may be tremendous interests and folks appealing some of the recommendations. None of that came up, so it was smooth sailing. So I think that's it. I'm happy to entertain any questions. It was a good meeting. We get the summer off, so we don't need to meet again until the fall. Again, happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Vice Chair McShane. Are there questions of the board on the report?
Okay, I just would acknowledge I'm also here with one of our other board members, Trina Kaufman Gomez from the city of Watsonville. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me bring it out to the public. Are there any public comments on the report? Are there any public comments on the Vice Chair's report? Yes.
I'd just like to thank the Vice Chair for his enthusiastic and informative report this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Appreciate it.
All right. This is a discussion item, so there's no action to be taken. Thank you, Thank you, Vice Chair McShane. Appreciate it. Okay, we're now at item 12, which is the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be a short one, but most of the time in the last couple of weeks, I've been spending it with the other CEOs from CalCCA to talk about legislative and regulatory issues. They are heating up quite a bit, both in Sacramento as well as in San Francisco. One of the bills that has been introduced just in the last couple of weeks is SB 237. This bill would bring back direct access, and that's the ability for any supplier to tap into customers. They usually go to the largest customers out there and try to provide generation services to them. And this is somewhat of a concern to us because it does not look closely at the environmental goals that we have here in California. Most of those suppliers tend to be from out of state, so they, if things go bad, as they did back in 2001, they can just pick up their attachés, I guess, and head back home and leave our customers in our state with all sorts of issues. Also, they really don't represent the community, so most of the decisions that they make are done behind closed doors because they are private organizations. We are beginning to formulate which stand we're going to take at CalCCA. This bill is going to go through a number of committees before eventually it moves up to the legislators. We'll see how it goes, and we'll keep updating you on it. On the regulatory side, there are a couple of things that are very important. One is the PCIA proceeding, which it's coming to conclusion probably by the end of July. It is one of the most important and the biggest risk that we are facing. The investor-owned utilities proposal seem to indicate that they want to do things in a way that will increase the PCIA by almost 100% for us. It would be, if that were to happen, that pretty much not just wipes out any surplus that we have, but it will put us back in a negative territory. And if it does happen, then we're going to have problems continuing to operate in the future. Obviously, we are fighting that every which way we can. And our proposals will, if not slow down or reduce the PCIA, at least it will stop it where it's at. We will see how the administrative law judge will rule on it. Then eventually his or her decision will end up going to the full commission for ratifying or approval sometime at the end of July or August. It may not be the end of the discussion. We may have to go back and litigate if need to. But it's an issue that's consuming quite a bit of our time lately, and putting a few decisions on hold just to make sure that we if negatively impacted, that we don't get to the point of doing something too soon that shouldn't be done. So the other issue is the RA proceeding, and that's resource adequacy. And that seems to be moving. I think eventually it will become if not neutral, perhaps it will be positive for us. But it remains to be seen. The answer probably to that, as well as a number of other issues that we face, is for us to get the super JPA moving a little faster, because the comments that we keep hearing all the time now coming from the CPUC is we're becoming a fragmented industry, and they're worried about reliability issues. And to the extent that we can do things jointly, that probably will be the better way to go. So we will work with the other CCAs to see if we can do things on a joint basis that would probably be less expensive for us, as well as give the CPUC the comfort that they need, knowing that we are acting collectively as one group instead of individually. That's what I wanted to report on. Finally, unfortunately, the San Luis Obispo decided to go with a different provider, so they started negotiations with them. We were one of the top two, but obviously, in that case, being the second doesn't really help a whole lot. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Are there questions by the board?
Just in terms of the governance of a statewide JPA, I mean, we're a JPA, and I'm sure the others are JPAs, so you're going to have a JPA of JPAs. And I can only imagine the complications of establishing a rational governance.
Yeah, the way we have it now is it will be made up, the governance of it will be made up of the CEOs of the JPAs or the cities that will decide to participate. So it will be the person who's running the organization. To the best extent we can, we're trying to have that JPA of the JPAs not have anything to do with either legislative or regulatory stuff. It's just there only to find common interest among the members to pursue certain things, whether that to be joint RA acquisition or joint procurement of resources, or even providing joint services like what we get now from a number of vendors that we are working with, whether that to be data management or scheduling coordination.
Okay, other questions, comments by board members? So, Tom, are we working directly with other CCAs on the legislative front, and what are the prospects there?
I spent 2 hours this morning talking about nothing but to the other CEOs on the phone.
Okay.
Tom, this is Matt Huffaker. On that same note, have we hired a professional lobbyist to help with some of our legislative advocacy as well?
Yes, we have one. Also, San Francisco has one. MCE, Sonoma, and a couple of other. Lancaster has also a lobbyist, and collectively at Cal CCA we have actually 2 lobbyists, not just one.
So, my follow-up to Matt's question is: does it make sense that for those of us that are on the board that have lobbyists, that we probably should, reach out for some coordination and work on this with the lobbyists of the community power?
Generally, our lobbyist is Pete Montgomery, and we're in contact often. And when he needs me to reach out to you folks, he does let me know, and vice versa.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure we inform our lobbyists in the city of Salinas, and hopefully other board members will do the same. I'm sure. Is this on the? This is not on the League of Cities, right, agenda at this point?
Not that I'm aware, Mr. Chair, but I was just going to say those of us that don't have lobbyists, we certainly could be spoon-fed a resolution or a letter, and we could take action.
That's a great idea. Can we take that step, Tom?
Of course, we'll keep that in mind.
Right.
Any time that we need to come to you folks and have you get involved, we'll do that.
Thank you. Any other comments by the board or questions? Are there any public comments? Yes, sir.
Just a question. I'm very intrigued by this super JPA concept, and I just wondered if the scope of that could be broadened to, for instance, collective financing, sort of securitization of municipal bonds on a big scale might have some good financial advantages for everybody.
It's on the list for sure, especially to fund a lot of programs that it's best to try to fund it with a large sums of money instead of trying to spend like $1 million on it 1 year at a time.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Kevin Dayton, member of the public. Question. I know you've been talking about San Luis Obispo. I want to get a clarification just for the public. First, are you referring to the sections of San Luis Obispo outside of the city who aren't developing a community choice aggregation program? And also, who is the competitor who is right now undergoing negotiations?
Staff have an answer?
The city of San Luis Obispo, only the city of San Luis Obispo incorporated, along with the city of Morro Bay, both of them decided to put a joint action agency together. So it will be a joint action agency of 2 cities for now, and they're trying to recruit other cities within San Luis Obispo County. They both approached us and said, would you be our staff in making our CCA happen, and then later on you can run it as our staff, but not have them join us. They didn't want to join us. They just wanted staff to run their operation. We give them a proposal along with others. I'll be honest, I would rather not at this point say who the competitors were. I'll leave it up to San Luis Obispo to make that determination once they conclude negotiations that they have right now. Actually, we did not, I don't know which one they chose. I heard through the grapevine, so I have no intention of repeating that in public until they reveal it and eventually maybe even contract with that entity.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are there any other comments or questions by the public? Okay, seeing none, we can move to item 13, which is to adopt a resolution authorizing the execution, of a 15-year power purchase agreement for renewable supply with Duran Mesa LLC. Now, this is an action item, and I believe requires a roll call vote.
Yes, that is correct, due to the teleconferencing we're doing.
Thank you.
And a quick introduction, Mr. Chairman. We've been working on this project now since September of last year, working with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. It's a 200 megawatt power plant, wind, located in New Mexico, and you're going to get all the details from Jeremy later on. Jeremy Clark has started working with me on this for the last couple of months, and since September, when we start talking to those folks, Stephen Hall, who's with Troutman Sanders right behind me over here, he's been our legal consultant or legal counsel on all power supply contracts, and he has also been our counsel while we're negotiating these agreements. He's actually our chief negotiator, so he's back here to answer any questions that you folks might have later on if neither Jeremy nor I can answer it. Jeremy, go ahead.
Well, so I'm excited to be here today. This is our first big renewable PPA that I'm presenting to the board today. It is a joint project with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, 200 megawatts in the state of New Mexico, and our share is 45% of that project. I'll go through more detail and explain our decision as we go through the short presentation. If you have questions about the presentation itself, that needs further explanation, feel free to interrupt me as I go through it, and I would just ask that all other questions are held to the end. I'm just going to kind of go through a short story to discuss where we came from and where we're going. So like Tom stated, September of last year, we issued a joint RFO with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And from there, we received 87 offers with 49 different projects. And from there, we shortlisted 3 projects that best fit our portfolio and the goals of the counties and cities that we represent. And honestly, during this process, we only found one local project that really was way outside of the final scoring mechanism that we used. And that's one reason we have issued the Go Local RFO recently to see what else is out there. This next slide is a representation of the 3 shortlisted PPAs that we're in negotiations with. The one with Pattern it's ready to be executed. That's why it's being presented here to the board today. But the 3 shortlisted projects are the 200 megawatt Pattern Wind project, 128 megawatt solar plus storage project in California, and then another 150 megawatt solar plus storage project in California again. And as you'll see on the slide, the blue line represents the percent of load that these 3 projects will contribute to, and it's about 20% baseline. The orange line is our RPS requirements through the state. It starts at 35%. Is our RPS in 2021 and up to 50% in 2030. And of the RPS goals, these 3 projects contribute 62%, coming down to 40%. And that's because load is increasing and RPS is increasing, so the contribution factor will decrease over time.
Jeremy,
Yes,
could you just explain what RPS is?
Yes, RPS is the Renewable Portfolio Standard that is set by the state for each load-serving entity. And the goals are 30% by 2020, but then after that, we are ramping up to 50% renewable by 2030.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you. And that's what the orange line represents. Now, the green line is another bill, State Bill 350, that requires load-serving entities to meet 65% of their RPS standards through long-term renewable contracts of 10 years or longer. This contract, this PPA is 15 years, so it meets those goals. And the others, we have a 15-year PPA that we're negotiating and a 20-year PPA that we're negotiating. And if all 3 are executed, we'll meet 93% of SB 350, and it'll decline over time, and we'll layer in other long-term goals as time moves on. So, better switch slides. So a little bit about the project. Why New Mexico? Why is wind our first renewable project? Well, you know, a couple things. As the wind project is more of a standard project. We've been negotiating these PPAs. They've been around for many years, so they're quicker to get executed, more common. When you start adding storage to some of the PPAs, there's more complexities to negotiate, and we want to make sure that all the boxes have been checked, all T's crossed, all I's dotted, and that's where we're at with this Pattern Wind project. We want to make sure that we're presenting you the best document so you can make an informed and good decision on that. So it's developed by Pattern Wind Energy. They're a very established renewable developer with over 10 gigawatts in their portfolio of solar and wind. The Corona Wind Project, which is the specific name of this project, is part of a larger development in New Mexico of about 1,500 total megawatts of capacity that will be imported into California. So we kind of share the risk with other counterparties with developing the transmission line and the project itself. Like I've stated before, it's a shared resource between us and Silicon Valley, we kind of pursued wind for renewable generation diversification. So we're not just 100% solar. We have wind assets that will blow at night. On this slide, one thing I want to note is the Corona Wind Project has a 48% capacity factor. What that means is the 200 megawatt generation capacity, we will receive on average 48% of that output steady over the life of the contract. When you compare that to California wind, which there's not a lot of development space out there for California wind, but it's 27% capacity factor. The state average for New Mexico is 33%. So we have a very good and reliable project that we're looking to contract with on a long-term basis. In Santa Cruz, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up. I'm not able to see you over the monitors, so.
Will do.
And this next slide is similar to the one I showed you a few slides back, but this is Corona's individual contribution to Monterey Bay's portfolio. And alone, it will help us meet 50% of the State Bill 350 requirements, which is 65% of our RPS when it comes online in 2021. And it's between 8 and 10% of our overall portfolio needs on a long-term basis. So this one PPA will meet a large portion of our renewable needs going forward. And one of the biggest reasons I think we looked at New Mexico wind as opposed to California was, one, availability, and two, with New Mexico being an hour before California, the typical wind project ramps up an hour before our evening peak. And this slide kind of, it represents how we can help mitigate the evening ramp here in California, which is the orange line, with the wind production of the Corona Wind Project. So it's ramping up a couple hours earlier to help mitigate that evening ramp risk. And from there, I will open it up to questions from the board.
Thank you, Jeremy. Are there questions comments from the board?
Yes, sure. This is Matt Huffaker. And Jeremy, you might have already mentioned this, but I'm curious about why New Mexico has a capacity factor that's 6% more than California.
Well, it really depends on its location more than anything, and where wind blows. And I think there's a few more sites with just better jet streams or paths of wind that come through there. And Corona is definitely at the top of that list.
Thank you.
I had a question along the same thing. So you said California averages 27%, Mexico 33%, but this project is 48%. Is that correct? And so this is that much higher than even the baseline averages of the states?
That is correct.
And so this is just a good windy location. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying
it's
here?
it's in Torrance, New Mexico, Torrance County. That is southeast of Albuquerque a little bit, so it's in a very windy corridor.
Then I have another comment related to this, but I think it's overall, this is great information. I would love to have this information in our staff report ahead of time, because this is answering a lot of the questions that I have. But even more than that, I represent one of 3 other cities, and they won't get information like this. And if we have this in the staff report, I think it creates a much better legislative record for the public to have. And so this is great information, but I would love to have this in the staff report, because you're answering my questions of why this project, what are the alternate projects, why are we doing it in Mexico and not California? The time thing I hadn't even thought of, but it makes absolute sense why you'd do that and how the impact on the effect or on the peak. But again, I think that'd be much more helpful to have in the staff report too.
It's great suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Lane. Yes, Mr. Bauman.
Thank you. Just a process question in regard to our JPA. So I just want to confirm that the operations board is authorized to delegate you to do that, and this does not require the policy board approval?
Yeah, I believe we have been informing the policy board about this all along, and they've concurred with our recommendation. I believe this falls in part to the operations board because you are in charge of the day-to-day contracting.
That's correct.
And then can you just clarify which portions of the agreement provide should they fail to complete construction of the facility and deliver power by 2021?
I can ask Steve to, if he can step up, and he's very familiar with this agreement.
Good morning. My name is Steve Hall. I'm outside counsel, procurement counsel for Monterey Bay Community Power. And thanks for asking a legal question. That's good. So in the staff packet, there's a copy of the power purchase agreement, which is in there, and that is attachment 2. And in attachment 2, once you get, so it's at the back of the agreement, it's in Exhibit B. So the page numbers didn't get copied in here, but it's, 75 or 80 pages back, but there's exhibits at the back, and in Exhibit B, these are where the requirements are for construction start, for the expected commercial operation date, and then for the guaranteed commercial operation date and what happens. And so the way that this is organized, I'll try to explain this in a way where you don't have to keep flipping pages back and forth, but it is somewhat of a complicated document. But on the first page of the document, this is where the expected commercial operation date is. And so this is the date that they are projecting that the project would come online, and that date is December 31st, 2020. So that date's on the first page, and then all the way at the back where we were with Exhibit B, this is what happens if there's delays and how that plays out. So the way that this is set up is that there's a construction start date, and if they don't start construction by that date, then they start to pay daily delay damages. If they ultimately hit the commercial operation date on schedule, they get those delay damages back. They have the guaranteed commercial operation date. They can extend that based on certain things, like if there's a delay in building their transmission line, because the transmission line is under construction. If there's a delay in permitting or something that's outside of the seller's control, also force majeure, forest fires, that sort of thing. If something like that happens, they are able to extend the commercial operation date. During that period, though, they have to provide replacement energy for us. So we would receive, it's called substitute product, and it's at a favorable price. It's a public meeting, so I won't say what the price is, but they have to provide replacement products. So the way the contract is set up at a very high level is that there is a date for them to come online. If they don't come online at that point, then they provide the substitute renewable energy product that meets our standards at the favorable price. At the end of that extension period, if the project has not come online, there's a termination payment there, and it's equal to the amount of the development security, which is also a redacted amount for the public record. I think that would be available to the board members to look at individually if any of you are curious to see what those dollar amounts were. And they also would pay delay damages at some point during their delay in the project. So that's at a high level, the overall structure.
Thank you for that clarification. So what instruments secure those obligations? Are there bonds, letter of credit?
Good question. They can provide for the development security. So there's actually two forms of security that they provide under the agreement. One is the security that they provide before it goes into operation. And then they also have a security they provide once it goes into operation. So if in year 3 or something, there's a problem. In the development stage, the better approach under a contract is to say cash or letter of credit, so that if there's a problem, you're not chasing down some parent corporation and in a dispute, we have a letter of credit. Tom makes a phone call, the money's in our bank account, contract's terminated, and we move on. So it's cash or letter of credit, and then at commercial operation, they have the right to replace it with a parent guarantee, which they probably would, from a creditworthy entity that meets certain financial criteria, or cash and letter of credit at that point.
Thank you. So a question along that line. So I'm looking in your Exhibit B, and it is, as you said, so I was wondering why you do have that redacted amount or that redacted line in there, because you talked about if they fail to meet it, and they say in the event that the seller fails to construct the guaranteed capacity by such date, seller shall pay capacity damages to the buyer in an amount equal. Then you have that redacted out. I mean, that's the critical amount. And so help me understand why that is redacted from the public record.
Yes, and like I said, and I hope I'm not overcommitting, but I think that number would be available to any of the board members to view individually. But the reason it doesn't go into the public record is that it's like price, that the credit terms are negotiated with each supplier, and that's something where, as a buyer, we keep leverage in every negotiation we'd have going forward if the seller doesn't know what the last deal was, because otherwise that's our starting point. They'll say, in the last contract, you gave pattern X, and now we need X plus or X minus in the case. So the provision that you pointed to, section 6, that amount there is if they build the project, but it's not quite the 200 megawatts, that they have to buy it down. However, there's a minimum threshold, and if they don't build 90% of it, then it's not considered to be built. But if they're close and there's one wind turbine that just couldn't be sited, maybe some siting issue or something at the last minute, that then we get paid. But it's stop there.
Just to add, we are in the process of negotiating with 2 other suppliers, 2 other developers for solar plus storage. So obviously we're trying to keep some of these numbers off the public record, because we don't want to impact the negotiations taking place with the other folks.
All right. Just a follow-up question I have. Then if the construction start date is delayed again, what happens specifically?
Yep. So if there is
scheduled for the end of this or end of 2019, right?
So the expected commercial operation date is December 31st, 2020. This question, everybody has this question about the contract. What happens if the construction date is delayed? It moves in parallel with the guaranteed commercial operation date.
Okay.
So it's day for day. They both move. So if the seller has an excuse and says there was a forest fire and the road was out for 30 days and no equipment could get in here, then everything moves back 30 days. But there is an outside stop date, which is also redacted because that's a confidential thing within each PPA date. And the jargon we use for that is the cliff date. And that's the date that no more excuses. If it's not built, we can terminate and we take the development security. And
Great. So, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from board members?
Just one question. Tom mentioned that this is the first agreement, and you're going to be pursuing other solar projects. Is the or you're going to be pursuing solar projects? Will there be a kind of a preference to California projects, or is it going to be?
Yeah, the two other developments that we are negotiating right now combined are 300 megawatt of solar development plus 90 megawatt of storage. Both of them are in California. And just to add, we do have an RFO for 20 megawatt of local generation, and that RFO is out now, and we are beginning to get some offers. I believe we're gonna close on that probably around the end of July. Then we're gonna be negotiating, and this is smaller installations, just to be done locally. Finally, we are started to talk to the folks at PG&E because they do have a project that is about to go live right here in Monterey County, and they would like to reassign the contract that they have right now to us, and we are talking to them to see if there are ways we can meet somewhere in the middle where we can take on the assignment and take that project off their hand. And that's a solar project.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the board?
I'll move approval of the resolution.
We have to go out to the public first. Yeah, sorry. Is there any member of the public that has a comment or question on this item of power purchase agreement? It looks like no one's moving to the lectern, so we'll bring it back to the board. What's your wish, Mr. Bowen? Mr. Bowen moves for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Been moved and seconded. Please, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, or
Yes.
Vice Chair, I need to actually take the roll call.
Roll call vote.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Clerk.
Sereno,
Aye.
Bernal,
Aye.
Huffaker,
Aye.
Goldstein is absent. Bauman,
Present.
it's an aye. Harvey,
Aye.
Long,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Corpus,
Aye.
and Chair Mendez is absent.
Right. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Good report. We're now under general business for board member reports and comments. Is there discussion items only? Yes, Mr. Lane.
I have a question. So help me to understand. So phase 2 for the residential it's happening on July 1st. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so is that going smoothly? And help me to understand, because I imagine most of the public isn't doing anything, so they'll just, it automatically happens. So if they don't choose the options, which I imagine most don't, what does it automatically default to?
The automatic default is to 100% carbon free and a 3% rebate at the end of this fiscal year. That's what they all default to, and they get switched into our side of the fence, so to speak, on the day their meter is read. So every day, starting July 1st, there will be several thousand meters being read every day on the residential customer side, and those folks on that day will be switched. Nothing really physically happens. It's just from an accounting perspective, from that day, PG&E no longer the supplier, we are, and eventually that we get paid for that generation service at the end of the month when they get billed.
So do you have a sense at this point how many people are actually physically responding to to you and opting into a particular program versus how many just aren't responding, they're just going to fall into the default?
Probably if I can get JR or Mark to answer that question. I mean, generally the ones that respond, I don't know how many responded. Maybe we can.
Hi, thanks again for the questions. Well, we had a great response last night. We had about 50 community members join our workshop in Monterey. But in terms of kind of action within the products, I wanted to let folks know that MB Prime, our 100% eligible renewable product will be available July 1st. So customers can opt up to that. But in terms of right now enrollments of folks kind of opting over or reinvesting in MB Share, MB Green Plus, I think collectively there's about 18 accounts that have enrolled in those products. So not a lot of movement. A lot of that has to do with us just trying to get the whole operation up and running. And then this fall, we'll be looking at a lot more of a concerted outreach approach around MB Share and MB Green Plus. But overall enrollment, 99% of the accounts are enrolled, and that translates to about 97% of the load. That's amazing. Most other CCAs just report out the number of accounts. That's not a true evaluation of program success. To have 97% of the load already enrolled is a pretty phenomenal feat thus far. We can definitely report back out the number of events that we're doing. We've got 2 great fairs this month as well. We've got our Flip the Switch event tomorrow. And we're actually partnering with the city of Watsonville to do a city-led mailer that's both in English and Spanish to let folks know about the transition over the month of July, as well as a couple other mailers that are going out. So we're really trying to go way above and beyond to let folks know about this switch.
So thank you, because I think that'd be good to know at our next meeting is really how many people are actively making a choice versus how many are just defaulting, because I would imagine it's going to be the far majority, 95% just aren't going to take any action. They'll just be defaulting, whatever. But also then, as they get educated 2 or 3 months down the road, do they have the ability at any point in time to opt into one of the other options once they understand what is going on?
Yes, 100%. So if they want to basically invest their rebate or share their rebate, they can certainly do that at any time, as well as to opt up to MB Prime. So there's kind of no sunset as to their action. And additionally, they have until 60 days after their meter read date in July for residential customers to opt out. So they do have some time to make a decision.
That's great. Thank
opt
you.
out without paying the price. They can opt out anytime they want. Yeah. No
Great.
matter what. If they opt out after the 60 days, there's a $5, one-time $5 charge.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments, reports by the board?
Through the chair, just one more. So it sounds like any questions that we get from the public that just about the rollover, we can send to the communications director, and he'd probably be a good point of contact for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Any other reports, comments?
Actually, I did have one
Yes,
other.
sir. This is Matt Huffaker. Sorry, I know it's delayed. But I wanted to just reiterate our appreciation for the partnership with doing an additional flyer, and that's been well received in the community. We pushed that out with all of our utility billing, both in English and Spanish, and that was in response to some feedback we received from our senior community about being able to read some of the information. So we put something out in partnership with NVCP staff. I think it was done very well, and again, in our efforts to just go above and beyond to get the information out. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Matt.
I had one other. Would it be like for our community, if you could come to our council meeting in our special presentation part of our meeting and just give a 5-minute presentation, power presentation of the change and exactly the options people have, I think that would be, again, helpful. That, for us, that would really be helpful in the outreach part. If you could just, someone from your staff come and do a brief 5-minute presentation of what's going on and what are the options. Is
Happy
that possible?
to. Anytime you tell us this is a good meeting for you to come, just let us know. And if I'm not there, someone on my staff will be there.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you, Lane. Any other comments or reports by the board? Okay. We said this was a short agenda, so we're at the end of the meeting. So our next meeting is September 5th. We can adjourn now unless there's some disagreement by any board member. There is, at least those here, lunch in the back available for you. Any other final logistics? Bren, Tom? Okay, meeting's adjourned. It's 11:52 a.m. Thank you.